morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Church in Fall River. That's where I am, right? Yes. My name is Paul Langston-Daley, and I serve our congregation in Concord, Massachusetts, part-time as their Minister for Social Action. And I also serve part-time at our congregation in Fairhaven, Unitarian Universalist Society of Fairhaven, as the Assistant Minister for Adult Religious Education. So it's a joy to be back with you all again. I love preaching here. It's a wonderful congregation. So I'm glad to be here today. And our chalice lighting this morning, let's see, I'm going to read it first and then I'll light it. May the light we kindle inspire us to use our powers to heal and not to harm, to help and not to hinder, to bless and not to curse, to serve you, Spirit of freedom. All right, our first hymn is incorrect in your order of service. It's number 389, Gathered Here. And we're going to sing it through a couple of times because it's short and fairly simple. So I invite you to rise in body and spirit and join in singing number 389, Gathered Here. 389. Yeah. It should be familiar. You should all know this. Gathered here in the street of the hour, gathered here in one song, gathered here in the store of the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong bond, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Once more. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. So I guess we're going to do our affirmation, which is number 471, if you're not familiar with it. Do y'all remain standing for that generally? Okay, great. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve human need, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Thank you. Please be seated. At this time, I invite you to provide us with any announcements and events that might be happening this coming week. David, we know you've got one.
As usual, the Course of Miracles will be at 9:10 a.m. It's a Zoom program where MC is Donald, and our assistants are Reverend Richard Trudeau, esteemed former professor of natural history of astronomy at Stone College. Dave Hott, RN, the site RN. And Alan Lugo, former manager, Deputy Director. Deputy Director. So, it has great power. It was also Andrea on the red side with the someone here of course in there. If you're tuning in, I think it's pretty lively sometimes, and lest you think that we are doing a brainwashing, that we speak with one voice, we speak with many voices. And it's a lively conversation, and that's just as it should be. You picture your choices and figure them out, and you get persuaded by them.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome back, Paul. I haven't actually seen you in a few years.
Right.
It's nice to see you again, to reconnect. And I want to let everyone know that Clay Donaldson will be here again next week. This will be her second appearance on stage in the worship service, so please be sure and come through for some.
So Steve Kamara told us last month that this was a spiritual announcement, and I just want to say that Walter and Dave Backwood will be playing at Belmont Club this Friday. It's from 6 to 9, and it's always a fun time in bed
All right. Bed by 9:30 is good, right?
Yeah.
All right. I believe that brings us to Nancy. If you would.
Just a word on today's music, I read the service manual about being woke, and so I was thinking, well, a woke song, from that. But then I remembered that there's a UU musician who sort of makes around in Scott, goes around and does stuff that vocalists would be better across the teacher, you know. So I'm all music today comes from the Jim Scott song.
Great. The Dalai Lama wrote, whether one is rich or poor, educated or illiterate, religious or non-believing, man, woman, or non-binary, black, white, or brown, we are all the same. Physically, emotionally, and mentally, we are all equal. We all share basic needs for food, shelter, safety, and love. We all aspire to happiness, and each of us shuns suffering. We all have hopes and worries, fears and dreams. Each of us wants the best for our family and loved ones. We all experience pain when we suffer loss, and joy when we achieve what we seek. On this fundamental level, religion, ethnicity, culture, and language make no difference. We begin from the recognition that all beings cherish happiness and do not want to suffer. It then becomes both morally wrong and pragmatically unwise to pursue one's own happiness oblivious to the feelings and aspirations of all others who surround us as members of the same human family. The wiser course is to think of others when pursuing our own happiness. And I invite you to join in our responsive reading, number 657, It Matters What We Believe. And if you all would read the italics. Some beliefs are like walled gardens. They encourage exclusiveness and the feeling of being especially privileged. Some beliefs are like shadows clouding children's days with fear of unknown calamities. Some beliefs are divisive, separating the saved from the unsaved, friends from enemies. Some beliefs are like blinders, shutting off the power to choose one's own direction. Some beliefs weaken a person's selfhood. They blight the growth of resourcefulness. Some beliefs are rigid, like the body of death, impotent in a changing world. Our reading this morning is called The Four Noble Truths from Tricycle Magazine. For you, those of you who are familiar with Buddhism, you will know that this is a pretty well-known magazine and website now out there around Buddhism. In his 45-year career crisscrossing the Ganges plain in North India, the Buddha gave a wealth of profound teachings. But underlying all of them are four noble truths. 1, there is suffering. 2, there is a cause of suffering. 3, there is an end to suffering. And 4, the way out is the eightfold path. The Buddha is said to have realized these fundamental truths on the night of his great awakening. But fearing that they were far too removed from ordinary experiences for others to understand, he decided to keep them to himself. Legend has it, however, that the god Brahma Samapati intervened, convincing the Buddha that he must pass on what he learned. So the Buddha tracked down his former meditation companions, the 5 ascetics, who were residing in the Deer Park at near Benares. In what is known as his first sermon, the Buddha taught them the Four Noble Truths. The ascetics are said to have been enlightened on the spot. The first noble truth, there is suffering, isn't pessimistic, as is often believed, but realistic. According to the Theravada Buddhist monk and scholar Walpola Rahula, the Buddha didn't mean that ordinary life is nothing but misery. Of course, there's happiness, he said, but it's just that even happy moments are ultimately unsatisfying because everything changes. Good, bad, or indifferent, nothing lasts. Impermanence, like suffering, is one of the 3 inescapable facts of existence. We all, without exception, are subject to aging, sickness, and death. Even the self isn't fixed or enduring, is the 3rd mark of existence. Trying to get what we want and hang on to when what we have, hang on a minute, let me read that again. Trying to get what we want and hang on to what we have while avoiding or rejecting what we don't want inevitably leads to disappointment. Ignorance of this reality is the root cause of suffering, the second noble truth tells us. The third noble truth, that there is an end to suffering, is the saving grace. Pain and dissatisfaction are not all there is. Just as suffering is the human condition, so too is the possibility for the end of suffering. The fourth noble truth, the eightfold path, spells out practical action we can take toward our own awakening and freedom from suffering of the samsaric or secular life of birth, death, and rebirth. The eightfold path guides us in living ethically, training the mind, and cultivating wisdom. And I invite you now to join me in meditation. This is the Metta Sutta, which I'm sure I have said this here before, so I know you're familiar with this meditation. It is the loving kindness meditation, and this translation is by Gil Fronsdal. So I invite you to just take a nice deep breath. Notice yourself in the seat. To reach the state of peace, one skilled in the good should be capable and upright, straightforward and easy to speak to, gentle and not proud, contented and easily supported, living lightly and with few duties, wise and with senses calmed, not arrogant, and without greed for supporters, and should not do the least thing that the wise would criticize. One should reflect. May all beings be happy and secure. May all beings be happy at heart. All living beings, whether weak or strong, tall, large, medium or short, tiny or big, seen or unseen, near or distant, born or to be born. May they all be happy. Let no one deceive another or despise anyone anywhere. Let no one through anger or aversion wish for others to suffer. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her child, her only child, so toward all beings should one cultivate a boundless heart. With loving kindness for the whole world should one cultivate a boundless heart. Above, below, and all around, without obstruction, without hate, and without ill will. Standing or walking, sitting or lying down, whenever one is awake, may one stay with this recollection. This is called the sublime abiding, here and now. One who is virtuous, endowed with vision, not taken by views, and having overcome all greed for sensual pleasure, will not be reborn again. I invite you to join in our meditation hymn number 352, Find the Stillness. Please remain seated. So some of you may know this story. It's not quite as common as the Christian story of the birth of Jesus, but this month in April 8th actually, is the celebration of the birth of the Buddha. So we're still in April, we're still kind of close. Siddhartha Gautama was born in northern India in the early 6th century. His mother, Maya, conceived him when she dreamed that a white elephant had entered her side. She gave birth to him in a standing position while grasping a tree in the garden. He was a prince, and as such, his family was extremely wealthy. When Siddhartha was born, his father went to the prophets to ask about his son's fate, and he was told his son would either be a great ruler, a spiritual leader who would bring India together, or a great political leader who would also save India in this way. The king, his father, determined that his son should be a great political leader. So he sheltered Siddhartha from the evils of life. They kept him safe and indulged within the walls of the palace. And when he did leave the palace, his father had the soldiers go out before him to clear the roads of the sick and the ill and the poverty-stricken. And one day, while out in town, Siddhartha saw an old man who was sick and dying that the soldiers had missed. Having never seen such a thing before, he was quite upset. He fell to his knees beside the man. This experience of seeing suffering for the first time was life-altering and led him to follow a spiritual path. Shortly after this experience, at the age of 29, he left his wife and only son and began his search for enlightenment. He tried the ways of the ascetics, living on only a handful of rice a day and as little water as his body could take. And he might have died during this period of trial had he not been with other monks who saved his life. He did not find enlightenment there. So he decided there must be another way, a path between indulgence and asceticism, a middle way. And after 6 years of trial and error, meditation and searching, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree, touched the ground, and awoke. But what does that mean, to be awoken? Jack Kornfield tells this story of the Buddha when he was wandering in India shortly after his enlightenment. He encountered several men who recognized something quite extraordinary about this handsome prince now robed as a monk. Stopping to inquire, they asked, "Are you a god?" "No," he answered. "Well, are you a deva or an angel?" "No," he replied. "Are you some kind of wizard or magician?" "No." "Are you a man?" "No." They were perplexed. And finally they asked, "Then what are you?" And he replied simply, "I am awake." The word Buddha means to awaken, and how to awaken is all he taught. So one might say the Buddha was woke. Now, the Buddha was very concerned about the notions of blind faith and hierarchical traditions. Hinduism, which was the prevailing religion at the time, allowed only the priestly class to perform rituals and to speak to the gods, much like the Catholic Church in its structure, where only the priests have access to the text. His rebellion was an Enlightenment reformation. And the Buddha believed that no one should follow any path simply because others told them it was the way. He believed that superstition was dangerous and taught that one should abide in the teachings, the Dharma, and not the person, the teacher. One should abide in the meaning and not the word, because words are impermanent. Words change over time, and our use of those words change. One should abide in wisdom and not in consciousness, because wisdom is enduring and consciousness is impermanent. Because of the time and place of his life, Buddhism relied on several underlying assumptions. The first assumption is a belief and an understanding about karma. This is the principle of cause and effect. As one sows, so shall one reap. Every effect arises from a cause. Under certain conditions, a cause will come to an effect. This is a universal principle on which Buddhist morality is based. The Buddha has specifically stated that karma explains the differences between living beings. It is also karma that explains the circumstances that living beings find themselves in each rebirth. The second assumption is that there is a thing called nirvana, the place beyond the limitations of body, mind, thoughts, feelings, and will, beyond confinements. And it is only in its very loosest terms compared to heaven. And the third, reincarnation. Although this notion was very different from the traditional understanding of a soul passing from life to life through death, Houston Smith describes the Buddha's understanding of reincarnation a little bit differently. He says, it's similar to that of the passing of a flame from candle to candle. And it's difficult to think of the flame on the final candle as being the original flame. The connection would seem to be a causal one in which influence was transmitted by chain reaction without a perduring substance. In other words, we carry with us all the same essence. If you think about it like well, the candle's a good example, but I also try to think about it as a river, right? Each time we're reborn, it's like dipping a glass in the water and pulling up a glass of water. This is how I am constructed in this lifetime. Now, depending on how I live my life, if I live my life well and my karma is good, that water will stay clear. If, however, I make choices that harm others, that are not consistent with the principles of Buddhism, then the water will get cloudy. And when I pour that water back into the river, it's going to pollute the river. So the more glasses of water that are filled with that kind of pollution, the more the river gets destroyed or ruined in some way or impacted. So the cleaner we can keep our own individual glasses, the cleaner the river stays. And we never, ever will get the same glass of water twice because you can't, because the river is constantly moving. So the Buddha described this path of living. How do we do this? He said, there are two branches which intertwine to create a whole life. The branch of compassion and the branch of wisdom. Walpola Raoul, author of What the Buddha Taught, states, according to Buddhism, in order for one to be perfect, there are two qualities that should be developed. Compassion on one side and wisdom on the other. Compassion represents charity, love, kindness, tolerance, and such noble qualities on the emotional side or qualities of the heart, while wisdom would stand for the intellectual side or qualities of the mind. If one develops only the emotional and neglects the intellectual, one may become a good-hearted fool. While developing only the intellectual side, neglecting the emotional may turn one into a hardened intellectual with no feelings for others. The two branches were developed using the Eightfold Path to Enlightenment. If one followed and lived this path, enlightenment will come. And this, you've seen this, it's a wheel with 8 spokes. I'm sure you've seen this symbol of Buddhism before. And those spokes are right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, and right effort, all of which are supported by right mindfulness and right concentration. We are living in a time when woke is a term that is being wielded as a weapon, as if somehow enlightenment is bad or wrong. We are living in a time where compassion, charity, love, kindness, tolerance, and such noble qualities of the emotional side or qualities of the heart are being rejected, denied, and discredited as weak. Wisdom is also being rejected, denied, and discredited. And to be clear, I've been doing this a long time, and every religious tradition that I am aware of centers compassion, caring, and wisdom. or wokeness, if you will. To reject being woke is to reject all that the world's religions have taught for millennia. And that seems short-sighted to me. But the Buddha was explicit. If this path, Buddhism, doesn't work for you, choose one that does. The philosophy is meant to be tested, tried, and challenged. It is to be understood that no path should be blindly followed. So for the Buddha to be awakened or to be woke is to be attentive and alert, to be aware, to be compassionate and wise, and to recognize that we are all, each of us, deeply interconnected and interdependent. And if we begin where the Dalai Lama suggests, from the recognition that all beings cherish happiness and do not want to suffer, it then becomes both morally wrong and pragmatically unwise to pursue only one's happiness, oblivious to the feelings and aspirations of all others who surround us as members of the same human family. The wiser course is to think of others when pursuing our own happiness. American libertarianism is inconsistent with Buddhism. And this is because Buddhism understands that nothing is separate from anything else. Everything is connected and interdependent. There's a concept called dependent arising. And Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Buddhist teacher and author, gave some really good examples of that. Imagine for a moment you pick up a nice, ripe, juicy mandarin or an orange. And imagine for a moment the taste and the smell of that mandarin. Know that in that orange is contained the tree that grew it, the earth from which it grew, and nutrients that came up from the tree and the earth to help it grow. The rainfall that watered the tree and fed the fruit, the sunlight that the tree photosynthesized to grow both fruit and tree. Now consider again this slice of mandarin orange. It contains wind and water, sun and earth, none of which we as humans produced. That orange could not exist without all of those elements. It arises out of its dependence, as do we. Nothing exists on its own. Nothing. Not trees, not grass, not humans or animals, and certainly not wealth. Everything's come from and is influenced by the forces and powers that surround us all. And that everything is sometimes referred to in a bad translation as emptiness. You've all heard the concept of emptiness in Buddhism. So I just want to say that's a really bad translation of the concept. Emptiness, as the Buddha taught, is not obliteration and nothingness, which is what emptiness leads us to believe. It's quite the opposite. Emptiness is the recognition that nothing is isolated and alone and that all things are connected. All things come from the same source and return to the same source. Does that make sense? How many of you seen Everything Everywhere All at Once? Nobody? You got to go see this movie. Like, you just got to see it. It's fantastic. It won an Academy Award and all kinds of awards. And part of the reason I recommend this film is because it's a fundamentally Buddhist film. If you're watching this film with a Western perspective and looking for a linear line, you're not going to find it. That's not going to happen for you. Everything is connected and interdependent. Nothing is separate. And it's not linear in the way that we in the West understand things. Everything, everywhere, all at once is the understanding of Buddhism. It's a little bit like Schrodinger's cat, right? Is the cat alive or dead in the box? We don't know. It's both. Everything, everywhere, all at once. We just need to plug into it. And to be woke is to recognize this fact, to recognize the fact that what we see and what we know here is all part of what we do together. We are all here, as Ram Dass once said, walking each other home. And wouldn't it be nice if we could do that with compassion and wisdom and love? It is the deep and enduring understanding and knowledge that suffering is part of living, and that we suffer unnecessarily when we grasp and try to hold on to things that inevitably change. It is knowing that this kind of optional suffering can end if we are willing to open our hands and hearts and allow change to flow without holding or grasping. To be woke is following a path of compassion and wisdom that begins from the recognition that all beings cherish happiness and do not want to suffer. It then becomes both morally wrong and pragmatically unwise to pursue only one's happiness, oblivious to the feelings and aspirations of others who surround us as members of the same human family. And we are, each of us, capable of taking ourselves and others into account in this way. We just have to uncover our own true nature. I'd like to close with a story from American Buddhist Jack Canfield. He writes, in 1957, a group of monks from a monastery had to relocate a clay Buddha from their temple to a new location. The monastery was being relocated to make room for a new highway through Bangkok, so they had to move this thing. When the crane came and began to lift the idol, the weight of it was so tremendous that it began to crack. And what's more, it began to rain. The head monk, who was concerned about damage to this sacred Buddha, decided to lower the Buddha back down to the ground, cover it with a tarp to protect it from the rain until the rain was over. But later that evening, the head monk went in to check on the Buddha. And he shined his flashlight under the tarp to see that the Buddha was staying dry. And as the light reached the crack, he noticed a little gleam shining back through it, and he thought it was very strange. As he took a closer look at this gleam of light, he wondered if there might be something underneath the clay. He went to fetch a chisel and a hammer from the monastery, and he began to chip away at the clay. And as he knocked shards of clay away, the little gleam grew brighter and bigger. Many hours of labor went on before the monk stood face to face with the most extraordinary 10-foot tall solid gold Buddha. Historians believe that several hundred years before the monk's discovery, the Burmese army was about to invade Thailand. And so the monks, recognizing that their country would soon be attacked, covered the precious Buddha in clay in order to keep the treasure from being looted by the Burmese. Apparently, none of the monks survived the invasion, so the secret died with them. We are all like the clay Buddha, covered with a shell of hardness created out of fear. And yet underneath each is a golden Buddha or golden Christ, a golden essence which is our real self. Somewhere along the way, usually between the ages of 2 and 9, we begin to cover up our golden essence, our natural self. Much like the monk with a hammer and chisel, our task now is to discover our true essence once again. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. We invite you now to give generously to the work of this congregation for all that we do to care for one another within and beyond these walls. We thank you for your generous contributions this morning. Now is the time in our service when we share the joys and sorrows we carry with us in our hearts this week, an opportunity to celebrate together and to share our burdens that we need not carry them alone. I invite you now to tell us your joys or sorrows this morning.
Last week, last Sunday, she was already in the hospital. She said they had to come in for lots of excess fluids, hoping to go to rehab soon. And then, yesterday, I'm finally at Catholic Memorial. Is that a rehab center?
Yes.
And finally, at Catholic Memorial in Fall River, have a homesteading suite, highest level of therapy, a medical mix-up made for extremely painful withdrawal of some drug or something. Trying not to let go, finding it hard to forgive a medical screw-up. Please send energy. Greetings to churchgoers.
Good morning. I have a joy. My mother is turning 99 on May 4th. And we had a gathering yesterday to celebrate some of my cousins out of state. And so she's talking about the old days and so she is talking about her mother, her daughter, this and that. Her mother taught her a song, and she sang the song. No, and she's always had a beautiful singing voice. So it was quite a moment for everybody, and it was just a really happy time with my mother and my family. So that's great. Yeah. Her name is Jean Holmes.
Right. Thank you.
Hello. Mrs. Donnelly here is the newest library trustee in the town of Bridgewater. Town election was yesterday, and I guess nobody voted against her. She was actually not opposed, so she's kind of sure. But anyway, you could bow down and worship her.
Congratulations.
Sorry, that was an announcement. I just need 5 minutes of time with my worship committee after, and after.
So this is a story about the Dalai Lama. I lived in Staten Island, New York. My father was a pastor of the Moravian Church in Middle Beach. And the Dalai Lama came to Staten Island when he was escaping China in their grasp. And I knew he was coming for me. I was not raised in Buddhism at all. Never even heard of it, but I knew he was coming for me. I knew exactly where he lived, right near my girlfriend, up in the golf course. I never saw him, and obviously he then years later, back now about 2003, give or take, we had a meditation weekend, the group that my father told me. Remember him and my mother, and in that meditation, I was in a church. It was more like a stupa. It was empty. I was floating. I was point of light, floating in that building, and I watched as what appeared to be a great raft. At the time, I was not putting two and two together, and it landed right above me, and I could see 9 people. There were 9 people in the meditation group. And all I could see was 9 butts looking back at me. and so I joined, one of the butts was mine. And then we eventually went up through a hole in the ceiling, disappeared, and then I returned back into the same building. The green patch was gone. And obviously I wasn't pleased because of that meeting either. So I shared that with Kathy, who was not yet my wife at the time. And I said, what do you think that means? Her answer was, you're an idiot. And I said, well, I would be, but why in this particular case, am I an idiot? She said, because you should know this. And I should know. And now I do.
My beautiful sister, who died 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, was a founder of meditation center. She was a Buddhist in New Delhi called Sophia, and it was a wonderful joy of her life. And she shared it with anyone who wanted to know more about it. She actually cooked for the nuns or the, I don't know what you call them.
Yeah, they're nuns.
The male.
The males are priests.
Yeah, so she.
Or monks. They're monks, right?
The monks, right,
Yeah.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she would travel the world actually speaking the, I don't know. Yeah.
The Dharma, the teachings, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I guess with the Dalai Lama, I was just reading recently that I guess he's passed on his mantle to the next successor, Mongolian child.
Yep.
It wasn't expected. But anyway, what I wanted, it was a joy because I finally found a program that was offered that actually was successful, and I'm going to pass it on as a public service to us and our organizations. It might work for you. It's the Congregate Energy Aggregation Program, something along those lines. It's supposed to offer the least expensive electricity rates in the state. And the joy is that it was about a 3 or 4 month effort between Tricia and I. We were trying to find, when the rates went to spike, we said, this is ridiculous. Anyway, it worked. So our rate, she was supposed to be on the lowest rate in the state, right? The low income, subsidized rate. So I saved that program saved her 12%. And I've seen rates as high as like 0.33 something, per kilowatt hour. This rate is 0.104. So if anybody's like, looking at their rates and saying, this is kind of out of line, take a look at your electric bill. It's not any of the concomitant rates that they're charging. It's actually the rate of what do they call production rate, and it's usually at the top of the bill. At least hers is on the right hand side, and the rate is 0.104. So if your rate is higher than that, you can get on this program. If you're in the surrounding area of Fall River, you can join it very easy. It takes a couple of months, I guess, to go through and all that. It does. But even the churches, it says that organizations, businesses, any residents, you just have to be in that area. And for those out of town, you may search. Apparently, in this program, there's a statewide program. 27, I believe, cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth did this for their local community, and Fall River was one of them. And I'm just here to say that if anybody was looking into that, it's actually real. It works. Burberry went down, and I was like, hey, this is actually, so it's 2 months now.
Nice.
And we got the savings, so just a public service, and it's a joy.
Nice. Yeah. Anytime we can put a little plug in American capitalism, I'm all for that.
That might be socialism.
That's okay. I'm good with that. Social democracies are fabulous. All right. I Thank you all for sharing your joys and sorrows. Please know that those that remain silent in this room are with us in our hearts, our thoughts, and our prayers. And I hold space when I do this ritual for all those who have yet to find a place in which to share their joys and sorrows. May they find peace. May they find hope. And I invite you now to join in our final hymn, number 123, Spirit of Life. Our closing words this morning are the words of Octavia Butler. She writes, "Everything you touch, you change. Everything you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change."